Hello, MCU fans. Today is going to be my timeline recap for Daredevil Born Again Season 2, looking at when it happens in the MCU timeline. So, lots to discuss. Let's dive right in, see what we can find out. So, right off the bat, I want to mention that Episode 5 has some awesome flashbacks in it, but I'm not going to cover them in this video because instead I'm going to make a version 2.0 that goes over all of Daredevil's flashbacks. We'll look at how they affect each other and how they all fit together. And one of the big reasons to do that is, remember, the wiki has moved Daredevil Season 1 from early 2015 into late 2014, and that actually affects all of the flashbacks. So look for this video coming soon, should be an awesome one. But now we need to get to the question of where does Born Again Season 2 fit in the timeline? Well, Disney Plus tells us that it happens after Fantastic Four First Steps, which of course is a different universe, but more importantly, happens after Thunderbolts. Of course, the question is, does the entire season happen after Thunderbolts or just the end of it? Well, to start the conversation, we have to look at where Daredevil Born Again Season 1 ends in the timeline. Remember, it culminated with that fight between the Task Force and Daredevil and Punisher. And if we look at the wiki breaks everything down by the day, which is just amazing. But it says the final 2 episodes happen on April 10th. And when I did my detailed breakdown of season number 1, I said the same thing, that basically episodes 8 and 9 are happening in April of 2027. All right, so we're going to go with April 10th of 2027. So now the question is, how much time has transpired since season 1? Well, in episode 8, we learned something important, that Heather has written a new book. And in fact, in season 1, she was talking about the fact that her publisher was giving her grief for not getting the next book out. So, wow, I mean, she managed to write a new book in between season 1 and season 2. So clearly a pretty big gap in time. So then in episode 3, we do get a little bit of a timeline hint when Kirsten says it took me 6 weeks to access my client. Of course, she's referring to when she finally got to meet with Jack. So we know it's at least 6 weeks, but it's got to be more than that, right? Well, in episode 2, the Kingpin says, as you know, months ago, there was an attempt on my life. Well, of course, he's referring to, when he was almost assassinated by Bullseye. So, okay, months have gone by. And then again, in episode 7, we get the same thing when they say, despite a citywide search, Murdoch has not been seen since the destruction of his Brooklyn apartment months ago. All right, so again, at least 3 months have gone by since the end of season 1. But then finally in episode 4, we get a clear answer. Because Jack, love you, Jack, he says, I have been in a cage for, 6 months. All right, thank you, Jack. So that means he's been stuck in that cage that we saw at the end of season 1 for 6 months. All right, 6 months after mid-April would put us in mid-October. Awesome. And in fact, we do get a bit of a timeline hint in episode 1 when we see a full moon. You can't always trust the phases of the moon, but if we go with it, then the full moon in October 2027 landed on October 15th, which sure enough is 6 months after mid-April of 2027. Love it. All right. Also, it is worth noting that throughout the season, but here's a shot from episode 4, we see the trees very barren of their leaves, which would make sense for something happening in mid-October. Now, it is worth noting that the Matterhorn fight is mentioned as happening on a weekend. Notice this news report from episode 3 is saying he's getting in the ring this weekend, isn't he? And of course, the Matterhorn fight is episode 4. So in episode 3, they're referring to episode 4 happening this weekend. Well, surely they can't be referring to the weekend of October 16th and 17th, right? Because if episode 1 is the night of October 15th, then we would surely be into that weekend by episode 2 and episode 3. So, all right, they must be referring to October 23rd and 24th. Not sure if it's a Saturday or Sunday, but definitely this weekend. In fact, that might mean the first episode needs to move closer to October 18th, the beginning of the week. But I think for sure we can say the fight with Matterhorn is either October 23rd or October 24th. And then I got to throw out that wouldn't it be cool if episode 6, where they put on the Daredevil masks, was actually happening on Halloween? Oh man, that would be sweet. Of course, it can't happen because episodes 4, 5, and 6 are happening really close in succession. I mean, probably Vanessa's funeral is happening maybe Monday, October 25th. But potentially episode 8 could be happening on Halloween, right? Because once again, they all put on the Daredevil masks, and guess what? Kingpin even said boo. Oh my word. Wouldn't that be awesome if this episode was happening on October 31st? But if it's not happening then, I'm betting episode 8 is still near the end of October. So then the question is, how much time transpires before we get to the epilogue of episode 8? I mean, obviously, Fogwell's gym, the glass has been replaced, so that's going to take a little bit of time. But I'm going to guess that not much time has gone by because I think they would have arrested Matt soon after he made that declaration of being Daredevil in court, right? So maybe we moved into early November at this point. And in fact, we end the epilogue and we end the season with Matt, of course, being in jail. So my guess is he hasn't had his trial yet, but they probably did not give him bail. They probably figured he was a flight risk and just threw him into jail and he's awaiting his trial. So, all right, I'm thinking that we end the season in probably early, at the latest, mid November. So, where does the season fit in relation to Thunderbolts? Obviously, our biggest hint is the Watchtower and the status of its construction, right? We learned in the Thunderbolts movie that they stopped mid renovation, but of course, they started it back up again after the Thunderbolts movie ended. Okay, so it was really helpful then that we saw the Watchtower in episode number 1. Wasn't that amazing? I mean, think about the fact that we went through all of those Netflix seasons and never once saw Avengers Tower, and then now we finally see the Watchtower during Born Again. All right, so if we compare the status of the two images, definitely the scaffolding is still up on the back of the building. And I'm thinking maybe a couple weeks have gone by since the Thunderbolts movie at most. So I'm going to think Thunderbolts, which remember took place over the span of about 2 days, is probably early October. And then, of course, we're now in mid October for Daredevil Born Again. Then finally in episode 7, we see that that scaffolding has been removed and we get this giant spike. I'm still not sure what is up with that spike, but if we throw all three images together, then obviously what the scaffolding was covering was that spike. It looks like the tower itself was pretty much built. I mean, the innards still needed work, but the tower was built. But the spike is why we saw that scaffolding. Okay, so yeah, I think this works perfectly for Thunderbolts to be early October and then for Born Again to be mid October. So then the question is, do we have any concrete proof that the season is happening after Thunderbolts? Well, remember, in the Thunderbolts movie, we learned that the Ox Group maintains significant holdings in unregulated labs in foreign countries and rumored human experimentation. And that's why after this congressional hearing, Val's like, okay, just get rid of any hanging chads that might get me impeached or land me in federal prison. Okay, so then does that explain why we have this crate with the Ox logo on it? Is that basically Val getting rid of her hanging chads and using Kingpin's Freeport to do it? Basically getting those illegal arms out of the country. That makes total sense, right? I mean, remember, we saw the Ox logo in Thunderbolts, and sure enough, here we're seeing it again. So yeah, I think this does a great job of explaining that Thunderbolts is happening prior to the Born Again season, and this is part of, Val getting rid of her hanging chads. Then, if you look at the fact that Mr. Charles now seems to be doing the dirty deeds for her, that would imply that we're after Thunderbolts because she doesn't want to be caught doing these things anymore. So here we have Mr. Charles saying, oh, I'm definitely supposed to be here, Sheila. And Kingpin's not happy about it, but introduces him as Mr. Charles. Of course, he refers to him coming from Langley, and Langley is the CIA headquarters where Val is working. And then finally, we get that awesome confirmation when he says, oh, you're definitely going to want to answer that phone call. And sure enough, it's Val calling. And after they hear from Val, they do everything that she wants, or everything that Mr. Charles wants, more specifically. So yeah, another indication that we're after Thunderbolts because Val is, off managing the Thunderbolts themselves, and Mr. Charles is doing her dirty work. But the really nice thing is this finally connects the dots between Val and Fisk. Eleanor went to Kingpin, Kingpin called Val hired Yelena, and Yelena attacked Hawkeye. So they were working together, but I think that after Born Again Season 2, Val and Mr. Charles will no longer be working with Kingpin. But okay, I will admit, I'm kind of bummed we didn't get to see the shame rooms for all these different characters. I mean, imagine if we had had a crossover with the Thunderbolts movie and could have seen what their moments of greatest shame were. Maybe for Matt, it would have been that haircut. Oh man, Matt, what were you doing? What were you doing with that haircut? But the more I think about it, it probably would have taken away from the overall story of the season if they would have had this crossover. Instead, they wanted the season to stand on its own, and I'm okay with that. All right, so that means we can say for certain that Daredevil Born Again Season 2 happens not only after Thunderbolts, but the entire season happens after Thunderbolts. In fact, if Thunderbolts is in early October of 2027, then Daredevil Born Again Season 2 is mid-October to mid-November of 2027. All right, so the final thing to do is to add this to our circuit board diagram. We need a line coming out of Jessica Jones Season 3 because of her appearance. And in fact, this line includes Luke Cage, because remember, he showed up in Jessica Jones Season 3. So then we have the line with Jessica and Luke just basically traveling through phase 4 to get down to phase 5. And now we can add Daredevil Born Again season 2. Happens from October to November of 2027. And we get the line connecting season 1 to season 2. And then finally, we bring in the line with Jessica and Luke. And notice just barely that Daredevil Born Again season 2 is below Thunderbolts, just a teens below it to try to indicate they're really close in proximity. And then, of course, we got the few phase 6 entries that actually happened during phase 6. Everything else is happening earlier in the timeline, but soon we'll have Brand New Day, Vision Quest, Doomsday, and Secret Wars to fill up this page. And we even have some news on where Daredevil Born Again season 3 might fit in the timeline. Brad Winderbaum himself said there will be a small time jump, but it's not too significant. It's not like we're jumping ahead 5 years or anything. We're probably jumping ahead a year or so, kind of like the real life distance between seasons. Okay, this really convinces me that we're going to have Brand New Day, then Born Again season 3, and then Doomsday in the timeline. I mean, I know that Born Again season 3 comes out after Doomsday, but I think it's going to be an Ant-Man and the Wasp situation where it actually is happening prior to Doomsday. Maybe even teases something about Secret Wars. Wouldn't that be crazy? So, okay, what do you think about my placement for Daredevil Born Again season 2? Do you think I got it right? Do you think I need to move it around? Definitely let me know your thoughts on that. Of course, all these documents are out of my Google Drive, and I'll leave a link so you can find that. But I want to know your ideas because you know I love to read and respond to everything. Also, we have a May contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. And we have a membership option in case you might be interested in that. And I always love to mention the Discord. Here we are in the Timelines chat. Big shout out to Chronological, who was so helpful in breaking down the day-by-day timeline for Born Again Season 2. Plus, don't forget, we have the Doomsday Countdown Watch. Every day at 7 p.m. Eastern, we watch a different movie or show as we head towards the December 18, 2026 release of Doomsday. So we have 2,600 members across the globe. Conversations 24/7, and I'll leave a pinned comment so you can join. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.